you saw when you were a political person in the city of Baltimore?
Unfortunately, yeah. To what I mean, there's the generation shifts, and uh, you know,
Sure, and
you,
not
when I go back, you see the same. When I go back home, sometimes I'll see,
sure,
some of the folks have moved on and are doing
sure.
other things and are doing well and get
Hey,
excited
Rev,
about it.
I'm going to bring another caller in because I
Sure,
think
come
you lighten up the boards.
on. Okay.
Carla, you're on with the Ambezi, the Chief, and Reverend Phillips.
Hi, this is Leslie Parker Blythe. How are you? I've listened before. It's a great show, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Great deal.
Thank
I'm
you.
calling from Baltimore, and I'm very familiar with Dr. Tyrone Powers, very familiar with the culture of Baltimore. There's just a couple of things I'd like to add, and I'd like to get you and your guests' comments on it. So I believe that the criminal justice system is working extremely well. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, what it's designed to do. Such as, did you know that the police department in Baltimore City are allowed to use weapons, guns, that are not traceable? In other words, and you can help me with this, Mike, a lot better. In other words, usually when you use a gun, there is something called stridation. Is that correct, Chief?
That's correct.
And can you tell us what stridation means?
And what that is, the barrel of the gun is actually able to put markings on the projectile so that you can actually match that projectile back to the barrel of that weapon. That's the Reader's Digest version.
But that's about as best you can put it. In Baltimore City, the Baltimore City Police Department is permitted to carry weapons that does not produce stridations. So if a police officer uses his revolver, shoots and kills a citizen, or in our case, with the Talbot case, another officer, you cannot link the lethal bullet to the gun. Mm. Our city council members know this, and there has yet to be any mass discussion, any great discussion about remedying that problem. That's number one. Were you all aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that.
I was not
either. So that is true about Baltimore City. Another thing is, as you know, Chief, I serve on the Civilian Review Board. And right now we're battling our own city solicitor because he has placed the Civilian Review Board up under his office. Now, so not only does he want to represent the Civilian Review Board, but in his mission statement that is publicized on the city's website, the mission of the Office of Law and the city solicitor is to do what? In most states, in most cities.
They defend the city.
They defend the city, specifically the Baltimore City Police Department. So that there are systems in the criminal justice. There are systems in place to make sure that African American people, people of color, and even white people who are impoverished, make sure that they remain in a particular class within our society. So I don't get upset when, that's not the right word. I don't get so upset. I understand what the system is designed to do, and the system is doing it very well. So I would really like to hear all of your comments on my position. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your call. Reverend Phillips, I'm going to let you start.
Yeah, I was glad that you said at least that there was a civilian review board, because that was something that we were trying to work on that back when I was in office late in early 2000, and there was pushback they wanted to call it anything but a civilian review board. They didn't want there was just so much pushback on it. So on the one hand, I'm glad to hear that it exists, but then following right behind it, I'm a little sad and disheartened to hear that it's being kind of subverted almost, or just kind of changing its focus. It's almost like it's focusing so much on protection of the police force and that type of thing, especially if things like that are happening in terms of bullets or guns that leave no traceable marks. That's disheartening to say the least. I get her point in terms of the criminal justice system is doing what the criminal justice system is designed to do, which is to keep locking folks up, keeping the prison industrial complex working, and those type of things. Especially if you look at folks like Michelle Alexander, New Jim Crow, and those type of things, those type of books that kind of point to the fact that some of those things are right in line, while we're lamenting over deaths, and we talk about folks being locked up and murders and things like that are happening. In some ways, it's functioning. That particular system is functioning as it should. So the question that you're getting at, and I think what we all ought to be working toward, is how do you remedy that? How do you reverse that? And it's difficult. It's an uphill climb, almost a Sisyphean task. That's hard to get that word out, but it gets, but it's something that you've got to continue to work toward, and it's going to take each member of the community's commitment to trying to better this, and a lot of that is they end up politicizing a lot of these things too, always. And it's always someone who's going to run for the next administration, who's going to run against whoever's in office now. They're going to have a better plan. They're going to think it's a better plan, and you're just recycling the same ideas over again. And I think our people, as Dr. Powers had mentioned earlier, we have to take charge, and we are the ones who put those folks in office, and we have to. You can't just vote and turn them loose. Say, okay, I voted, I did my part. No, you got to follow up. You got to hold folks accountable, and you have to call them out. And that means staying involved, staying engaged, and knowing what's happening. But to your caller's point, unfortunately, the criminal justice system is moving right along. And I'm not anti-police. I'm not anti any of that stuff. I don't want to give that impression, but I think it just, some things are disheartening. If those kind of things are happening, I mean, she kind of blew me away with the whole nostration, the weapons with nostration markings. That's disheartening.
Well, and I'll add to the caller's comments. When you look at law enforcement and its ultimate goal, and that is the protection and tranquility of the community, that's paramount what you're trying to maintain. Mm-hmm. And that should be done in a collaborative fashion. And of course, that's called community policing. Back when we were growing up, you saw the officer walking in through the Reisterstown Plaza shopping center, talking to the kids, talking to everybody, twisting his Baltimore blaster and all that stuff. So the concept for interaction and engagement is not new, but accountability is what I think the caller was really alluding to, Ms. Blyther. And it starts at all levels. So, for example, and you've heard, and the audience has heard me say this, and I used to say this in my previous life as a police commander and police official. No agency in the country can be successful without the support of the community. It just can't happen. And you look in Baltimore, one of the things that is keeping the city from really having a serious crime reduction model is because there's still a degree of mistrust from the community. Now, some of it is historic, some of it is perceptual, and some of it is actual. But you have to engage the community and give the community a role, a meaningful role in the overall operation of the city government, period. And when it comes to the police department, one of the things that I think gets lost in the sauce is the authority for an officer comes from the people. The people have said through legislation that we're going to allow these laws to occur that allow you to stop people, search people, and if necessary, under the appropriate circumstances, take a life. Because we have confidence in your training and in your background that you are going to do the right thing. Now, part of that whole accountability piece are the different layers of accountability. And that includes, in most cities, civilian oversight. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we tell people all the time is that police department belongs to the citizens. All the fancy cars, the helicopters, all that stuff, tax dollars pay for that.
Right.
And so there must be layers of accountability. There are thousands of officers. There are 18,000 police departments in the United States. And thousands of officers every hour of every day are doing an incredible job. However, like any large organization, like anything else, you have to hold people accountable. There has to be mechanisms for recognizing good work, which is very important because there's more good work happening than the stuff you're seeing on CNN. But there also have to be processes in place that identify and correct deficient behavior. So
right.
It's my hope that in Baltimore they are able to work out that whole civilian oversight piece because it's very important. It's important that the people know that there is an arm of the police department that makes sure that officers stay in check. And they also need to be able to see the good stuff. And they also need the stuff, excuse my grammar, that ain't so good. And be able to make recommendations, objective, fact-based recommendations to the chief so he or she can make the appropriate disciplinary moves or training moves or whatever else he or she deems appropriate to make sure that, number one, those officers are doing the job professionally, that they are safe, and that partnership is always maintained, because that's the only way you're going to deal with a lot of the things that are happening. You look at the movies that are coming out. You have Chirac, you have The Wire, you have all of those type of movies, Homicide, Life on the Street, that depict the cities such as Chicago and Baltimore as some type of just haven for illegal activity and shooting and drugs and pimps and all that other kind of stuff. When, right, like Ambezi said, Baltimore is a lovely city with a lot of tremendous things going on, some really unique and quaint and thriving neighborhoods, but you wouldn't know that if you look at CNN or MSNBC or any of the other networks that look at the violence that's happening. And it's not their fault. That's just what sells. So in essence, what I'm saying is that there has to be accountability on every level. Now, I can't talk about accountability and real quick without saying there also has to be internal accountability. One of the things that Mary Emanuel said in Chicago was that kids need structure. There's an importance about family and faith, and there need to be some real serious discussions about some of the deficiencies that are occurring in all the communities throughout Chicago. And I'm sure that's the same in every city. And so we have to make sure that internally that we are going back to some of the things that used to happen when we were growing up. And Reverend Phillips, you remember God forbid if your father found out you were cutting up in school